Chidera is popularly known as the Slumflower. She's an author and advocate who rose to popularity from her viral movement, Saggy Boobs Matter, in 2018. Since then, she's become a #1 Sunday Times bestselling author with her first book, What a Time to Be Alone, and has brought an important conversation about women's bodies and autonomy to the forefront through her 2020 Channel 4 documentary, Bring Back the Bush. Chidera, the floor is yours.
First of all, thank you to everyone for being here. When I got invited to be a part of this debate, I felt incredibly honored, excited, and raring to be involved because I think this conversation is so important, but I will admit it's not an easy conversation to be a part of because feminism is still evolving and it's not perfect. I'm sure we're all familiar with the argument or statement that not everything a woman does is feminist just because she's a woman. And when we discuss, can sex work and feminism be compatible, I wonder if we can also ask, can capitalism and feminism be compatible? Because for a lot of people, especially the women who are forced by their circumstances under capitalism to partake in sex work that involves them physically engaging with men, it's not always seen as empowering for them. And unfortunately, I wish that in our society, we would give more room to have conversations about when women do involve themselves in physical, in-person sex work with men, how they're protected and what they have to deal with, because we do exist in a society where, for the most part, men feel entitled to women's bodies. However, as someone myself, speaking from the perspective of a person who has experienced a lot of pushback on the internet for expressing sentiments that basically say that I wouldn't date a man who can't take care of me, that has gotten me into a lot of debates on the internet and a lot of people disagreeing because it pushes the idea that, love isn't genuine if money is involved. And in the same way, it kind of leads to the argument a lot of people have that sex work doesn't create room for genuine, intimate connections, and that's something that I strongly argue against, especially because probably from 2019, I would say, I dabbled in and out of experimenting with being a dominatrix, and it really opened my eyes to a lot of things, especially when it comes to power dynamics between men and women. And for a lot of people, dominatrixing, if that's a phrase, is a profession that they get paid for. And for those who aren't aware, being a dominatrix basically means that you are selling a service where you dominate men and you carry out a fantasy where you make them do things that they want to be made to do. So for some women, that involves findom, which is known as financial domination, where some women are handed the power to take over a man's finances. But what's interesting is within that, I've come across a lot of arguments from people saying that, well, if you're a financial dominatrix, then have you ever considered that the men you might be engaging with might be mentally ill? And have you ever thought you might be taking advantage of them? Because why are they so willing to hand you access to their money? And I find that argument quite fascinating because the idea that a man would be so enthusiastic to part ways with his money to express his attraction to a woman must mean he's mentally ill. And I think it tells you a lot about our society when we, associate men who are willing to share their resources with mental illness. But what's also fascinating about that counter-argument is that in a world where women are unfortunately subjected to a wage gap, being able to advocate for yourself financially is a very powerful thing. And what I find fascinating is that we don't realize when we're demonizing women for things that men are asking for, because if there wasn't a demand for it, then the service wouldn't be there. And off the back of that discussion as well, when it comes to financial domination, when people say things like, oh, that woman is taking advantage of that poor mentally ill man who has lots of disposable income to share with her, why do we not have that same argument towards bartenders that serve alcoholics alcohol? And why I say that is because the idea that a man must be being taken advantage of for actively seeking a service, again, flips the onus onto the woman and demonizes the woman for knowing how to harness her power in a society where men largely feel entitled to sex. And so for me, going back to what I initially said about receiving pushback on the internet for saying that I would only date a man who has the financial means to bring ease to my life, the reason why a lot of people have felt strongly opposed to that is because it's the idea that I'm putting a paywall between myself and a man. And a lot of us have internalized this idea that love is only real if it involves struggling. And I think for me, the more I express those sentiments about wanting to be taken care of and the more I receive pushback, it has really opened my eyes to the fact that we aren't really as educated as we believe we are about what it means for a woman to respond to a patriarchy with her own version of feminism. For some women, their version of feminism is being a dominatrix as a black woman and making white men write essays about why black women deserve reparations. And while some people might argue that it's laborious on the woman's part to ask him to write that essay, I just want to argue that it's absolutely hilarious when he actually does write the essay. But also, it's about being able to engage with men on terms that allow you to fulfill your own power. Because for a lot of people, there is still that fear of men. Even in vanilla relationships, we don't want to admit it, but we fear men. We fear letting them down, we fear disappointing them, we fear telling them no. But for me, a lot of my feminism on my own journey as a woman, and for many women who occupy a similar interest and position as me, our feminism has involved actually saying, no, I don't want to do that with you, or saying, if you do want to do that with me, here's what I would like. And being able to express that power and actually seeing results from it is a very... I'm listening. Not necessarily. I would say that in a patriarchal society where women are overpowered by men, I feel like whilst you can't personally empower your way out of a physical structure that is patriarchy, I do believe that being able to exude your own boundaries, whatever those are, is a way of being able to live what it means to feel your own power. But for every woman, that will look different. So for some women, it might be that they want to practice a lifestyle of dominating men on their own terms. For some women, it might be that they'll sell foot pictures. But what's fascinating about the sex work conversation is that within the world we live in, we still find ways to distance ourselves from sex work. So I personally believe that selling foot pictures, even if it's not you using any kind of sexual language, it is still participating in sex work. But the reason why we want to distance ourselves from sex work is because we still internalize that shame that, sex work is bad and sex work must mean that you're this twisted person, where actually I think that as much as sex work carries its dangers, under capitalism, unfortunately, or labor technically is forced. So whilst there will be some people that choose to take part in jobs because they can and they want to, there will be some people who take part in jobs because they have to. And as long as we're not seeing a world where we're advocating for those who are participating in sex work because they have to, and we're not creating a world where those people are made to feel safe, and we're not hammering down on men, because the problem is, again, those women who are participating in sex work, as in physical, in-person sex work, are being faced with the most violence from men, whereas those who are participating in sex work, maybe on the internet, might experience being doxxed, having their Instagrams taken down, but ultimately it comes down to this whole idea again that what are men doing to make the world a safer place for women should those women decide to monetize their sexual interactions with them?